Welcome back to our channel, your premier destination for the most captivating and in-depth analysis of the bold and the beautiful. Today is a thrilling day to dive into the darkest corners of Los Angeles, where ambition and jealousy have finally collided in a catastrophic crescendo. Let us explore the shocking events that have forever altered the Forrester legacy. The gleaming towers of Forrester Creations have always stood as a monument to high fashion, artistic brilliance, and familial loyalty. However, beneath the polished marble floors and the glamorous runway lights, a toxic undercurrent of jealousy, entitlement, and corporate paranoia has been steadily eroding the foundation of the legendary fashion house. For weeks, the tension between the Forrester and Spencer dynasties has been escalating to a boiling point, fueled by the staggering global success of Katie Logan Spencer and Bill Spencer's controversial new fashion line. As the Logan brand soared, utilizing the stolen genius of Eric Forster's designs, a parallel war was being waged in the design offices, a bitter, deeply personal vendetta between R.J. Forrester and Will Spencer. But no one, not even the most seasoned observers of this legendary family feud, could have predicted the sheer brutality and psychological devastation that would unfold when the golden boy of the Forrester empire finally snapped. The catalyst for this unprecedented tragedy began in the pristine, commanding office of Ridge Forrester. For days, Ridge had been attempting to maintain order amidst the chaos of his father's stolen legacy and the internal bickering of his staff. He had previously refused RJ's persistent, entitled demands to terminate both Will Spencer and Melissa Dillon, viewing his son's grievances as little more than a petty romantic rivalry over Electra Forrester. But the paradigm shifted irrevocably when Will Spencer, armed with undeniable, damning evidence, walked into Ridge's office. Will did not come with empty accusations. He brought concrete proof of RJ's insidious manipulation of Melissa Dillon. The evidence meticulously detailed how RJ had abused his power as the boss's son, employing coercive tactics and psychological pressure to force Melissa into a toxic alliance designed to destroy Will's relationship with Electra. Faced with the undeniable reality of his son's tyrannical and unethical behavior, Ridge Forrester was forced to make an agonizing decision. The ghosts of Stephanie Forrester's legendary, destructive meddling loomed large in Ridge's mind, and he knew he could not allow that poisonous legacy to infect a new generation. In a moment of profound disappointment and authoritative finality, Ridge did the unthinkable. He fired his own son. The termination was not just a loss of employment for RJ. It was a devastating public castration of his ego, his birthright, and his identity. The very foundation of RJ's world, the belief that his name granted him absolute immunity and supreme power, crumbled into dust within the span of a single conversation. Cast out of the empire he believed was his divine right to inherit, R.J. Forrester did not experience a moment of self-reflection or remorse. Instead, he plummeted into a terrifying abyss of psychological panic and extreme paranoia. As he stumbled out of the Forrester Creations building, a venomous cocktail of humiliation, betrayal, and bruised ego coursed through his veins, poisoning every rational thought he possessed. In RJ's fractured, spiraling mind, Will Spencer was no longer just a romantic rival. He was an evil, calculating mastermind who had orchestrated a grand, Machiavellian conspiracy. RJ convinced himself that Will had deliberately engineered this entire scenario to systematically strip him of his legacy, usurp his rightful place at Forrester Creations, and ultimately claim the heart of Electra Forrester as his ultimate prize. As the afternoon bled into evening, the skies over Los Angeles darkened, mirroring the tempestuous storm brewing within RJ's soul. A massive, unseasonal storm system rolled off the Pacific Ocean, unleashing a torrential downpour upon the city. The heavy, relentless rain lashed against the pavement, accompanied by the ominous rumble of thunder and the violent flashes of lightning that tore through the black canopy of the night. It was a night perfectly suited for a tragedy, a night where the boundaries between civilization and primal savagery would be washed away by the deluge. Driven by an all-consuming madness and a desperate need to reclaim his stolen power, RJ climbed into his car and pointed it toward the coastline, his destination clear. The secluded beach house where Will Spencer resided. The drive down the Pacific Coast Highway was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and blinding headlights. Inside the sterile confines of his vehicle, RJ's internal monologue was a cacophony of justifications and homicidal rage. He muttered to himself, his hands gripping the steering wheel with such bone-crushing force that his knuckles turned a ghostly white. He convinced himself that Will was not just a personal enemy, but a corporate spy, a treacherous mole working on behalf of the Logan brand to dismantle the Forrester empire from the inside out. By the time RJ pulled up to the desolate stretch of beach where Will's house stood, he was no longer a fashion designer or a beloved son. He was a desperate, cornered predator acting on pure, unfiltered instinct. The beach house stood isolated against the furious backdrop of the crashing ocean waves and the howling wind. Inside, Will Spencer was attempting to find some semblance of peace, completely unaware of the monstrous storm that was about to breach his sanctuary. When the heavy wooden door of the beach house burst open, the sound was nearly swallowed by the roar of the thunder outside. RJ stood in the doorway, drenched to the bone, his clothes plastered to his frame, his eyes burning with a manic, unhinged intensity. The sudden intrusion shattered the quiet solitude of the house, instantly transforming the living room into a claustrophobic arena of death. Will, startled but maintaining his characteristic composure, stood up from his chair, demanding an explanation for the violent entry. But there was no reasoning with the entity that RJ had become. The confrontation ignited instantly, a volatile explosion of years of pent-up animosity. RJ lunged into the room, his voice a guttural roar as he hurled a barrage of wild, baseless accusations at Will. He screamed about the Logan brand, accusing Will of being a filthy corporate spy, a parasite who had infiltrated Forrester Creations solely to steal their secrets and feed them to Katie and Bill Spencer. He ranted about Elektra, claiming that Will had brainwashed her, manipulating her affections to further humiliate the Forrester name. Will, recognizing the dangerous instability in RJ's eyes, attempted to de-escalate the situation. He spoke in a calm, measured tone, firmly denying the absurd allegations of corporate espionage and reminding RJ that his termination was the direct result of his own toxic actions. But Will's calm demeanor, his refusal to match RJ's hysterical rage, only served as an accelerant to the fire consuming RJ's mind. To RJ, Will's composure was not a sign of innocence, but a display of arrogant superiority, the ultimate insult from a Spencer to a Forrester. The verbal sparring rapidly deteriorated, the words giving way to the primal language of physical violence. RJ lunged forward, closing the distance between them in a fraction of a second. He shoved Will violently backward, sending him crashing into a heavy glass coffee table. The glass shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, the sound piercing through the ambient noise of the storm. Will, now fighting for his life, scrambled to his feet, defending himself against the relentless, frenzied assault. The living room became a war zone, furniture overturning, lamps crashing to the hardwood floor. The two men locked in a desperate, breathless struggle. Will was stronger, but RJ was fueled by the terrifying, limitless energy of absolute madness. The brawl spilled across the room, a chaotic tangle of fists and desperation. RJ, feeling his physical strength waning against Will's defensive maneuvers, allowed his survival instinct to override whatever shred of humanity he had left. His desperate eyes darted around the destroyed room, landing on a heavy, solid bronze sculpture resting on the mantel of the fireplace, a cruel irony in a house meant for relaxation. With a sudden, explosive burst of adrenaline, RJ broke free from Will's grasp, lunged toward the fireplace, and wrapped his hand around the cold, unforgiving metal of the sculpture. Time seemed to slow to an agonizing crawl as RJ spun around, the heavy bronze object raised high above his head. Will, still recovering his balance from the previous shove, looked up just in time to see the lethal arc of the weapon descending toward him. There was no time to dodge, no time to reason, no time to beg for mercy. The heavy object connected with the side of Will's head with a sickening, definitive crack that echoed through the room, momentarily silencing the storm outside. The force of the blow was catastrophic, an instant and devastating trauma that extinguished the life from Will Spencer before his body even hit the floor. Will collapsed, a lifeless heap amidst the ruins of his own living room. The heavy bronze sculpture slipped from RJ's trembling fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. For a long, suffocating moment, the only sounds in the beach house were the relentless pounding of the rain against the roof and the ragged, shallow breathing of RJ Forrester. He stood over the body of his rival, staring down at the horrific reality of what he had just done. The Golden Boy had become a murderer. In the immediate aftermath of the fatal strike, one might expect a wave of crushing remorse, a desperate plea for forgiveness, or a frantic call to the authorities. But as RJ stared at Will's lifeless form, a terrifying, chilling coldness washed over him. The panic and manic energy that had driven him to commit the act evaporated, replaced by a sociopathic clarity and a singular, overwhelming instinct for self-preservation. The entitlement that had defined his entire life morphed into a dark, twisted conviction. He could not go to prison. He was a Forrester. He had a destiny, a legacy to fulfill, and Will Spencer was just collateral damage in a war for survival. He felt no remorse, only a cold, calculating determination to erase his presence from this nightmare. Moving with a terrifying, mechanical precision, RJ began to systematically alter the narrative of the night. He knew he had to stage the scene, to transform this deeply personal, rage-fueled execution into a random, chaotic tragedy. He grabbed a towel from the kitchen and began meticulously wiping down every surface he had touched, erasing his fingerprints from the door handle, the shattered coffee table, and the deadly bronze sculpture. He then turned his attention to the room itself, channeling the mindset of a desperate intruder. He violently pulled drawers from the cabinets, scattering papers and valuables across the floor. He found Will's wallet, emptied its contents, and tossed it carelessly near the doorway. He shattered a side window, ensuring the glass fell inward to simulate a forced entry from the outside. Every move was calculated, every detail scrutinized by a mind that had completely detached from morality. RJ was no longer just staging a crime scene. He was designing a masterpiece of deception, utilizing the same meticulous attention to detail he once applied to high fashion. He stepped back, surveying his grim handiwork. The room looked exactly like the site of a botched burglary, a random act of violence in a city known for its dark underbelly. He felt a twisted sense of pride in his creation, a chilling confirmation that he was, indeed, smarter than everyone else. But the universe has a cruel way of punishing arrogance, and RJ's meticulously crafted illusion was about to be shattered by an unpredictable variable. As RJ stood in the center of the room, preparing to make his silent escape into the stormy night, a sudden, brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the darkness outside the beach house. The harsh, electric light cut through the torrential rain, casting a stark, terrifying glow across the shattered window RJ had just broken. And there, standing in the pouring rain, framed by the jagged edges of the broken glass, was Melissa Dillon. Melissa had been drawn to the beach house by a complex web of anxiety and lingering affection. Haunted by the mysterious, threatening phone call she had received earlier in the day, and burdened by the immense guilt of her forced complicity in RJ's schemes, she had sought out Will, hoping to find solace or perhaps to warn him of the depths of RJ's depravity. She had walked through the storm, her heart pounding with a nameless dread, only to arrive at a scene ripped straight from her darkest nightmares. Through the rain-streaked glass, Melissa's wide, terrified eyes took in the horrifying tableau. She saw the overturned furniture, the scattered belongings, and the lifeless, bloody body of Will Spencer lying on the floor. But the true horror, The sight that froze the blood in her veins and stole the breath from her lungs was the figure standing over the body. She saw R.J. Forrester, his clothes soaked, his face in a motionless mask of cold, calculating malice, holding the blood-stained towel he had used to wipe away his sins. For one agonizing, eternal second, the storm outside seemed to cease entirely. Time stood still as R.J. slowly turned his head, his dark, hollow eyes locking onto Melissa through the broken window. The eye contact was a silent, devastating collision of two worlds. In R.J.'s eyes, Melissa saw the death of innocence, the birth of a monster, and a silent, terrifying threat that promised she would be next if she dared to speak. In Melissa's eyes, R.J. saw the total collapse of his carefully constructed alibi, the fragile thread upon which his entire future now hung. The golden boy of Forrester Creations had crossed the ultimate threshold, descending into a darkness from which there could be no return. He had committed the ultimate sin to protect his legacy, only to have his horrific secret witnessed by the very woman he had manipulated to start this tragic chain of events. As the thunder crashed overhead, shattering the silent standoff, the true nightmare of the bold and the beautiful was only just beginning. How far will R.J. go to silence the only witness to his monstrous crime? And how will Melissa survive the terrifying reality that she now holds the key to the destruction of the Forrester Empire? The storm raging outside the beach house is nothing compared to the tempest of deceit, blackmail, and terror that is about to engulf